The 2024 NBA Play-In Tournament is here, and as per usual, I am here to make predictions. Hello everybody, welcome to House Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. So the playoffs are right around the corner as indicated by the plan being here, and there is going to be pretty intensive coverage on this channel. So look forward to that, probably 2 videos a day going forward, at least throughout the first round. With that said, I am going to be going over each of these matchups, and I'm going to start in the Eastern Conference. And just real quick, I'm going to get the series that people probably care the least about out of the way. Series, it's one game, you know what I mean. But the Chicago Bulls versus the Atlanta Hawks. Between these two teams, obviously they're the worst team that has a chance, worst teams that have a chance to be in the playoffs here. So yeah, that's why no one really cares. But between these two, I feel like the Hawks to some degree are a little bit more playoff built. You know, they've obviously last year they made it in the play-in. They pushed the Boston Celtics to nearly 7 games. And I don't feel like the Chicago Bulls could do something like that. However, between these two teams, I do feel like the Bulls have a better matchup. I also think that the Bulls over this season, as the season has gone along, have become progressively better and better as a team, whereas the Hawks have kind of just been the same level of blah throughout the entire year. The Hawks having more of a playoff type roster, playoff type scheme, a more modern approach to basketball, that can definitely help. But also the Chicago Bulls have the clutch player of the year more likely than not in DeMar DeRozan. The Bulls have also become more of a three-point shooting team. They've gone from 30th to 26th, which is still not very high, but it is an improvement. I like the construction of this roster more with Kobe White rather than Zach LaVine, because even though Kobe White's not necessarily as high volume of a scorer as Zach is, he at the very least is a better decision maker and a much better defensive player. So I feel like this Bulls roster is more well-rounded. It's more of a modern team than it was last year. Still not as modern in their philosophy as the Atlanta Hawks are, but I'm going to go with the Chicago Bulls just because I also feel like after the rough start to the season that they had, as I mentioned, them getting progressively better throughout the year, if I had to guess, you could probably look at their last like 30 games and they're at least like winning 60% of them. So yeah, I'm going to go with the Bulls here. I just think they're the better team at this point in the season. Moving down to probably the most interesting initial matchup with the Sixers and the Miami Heat. So between these two teams, in reality, just looking at what the play-in is in the Eastern Conference, it's kind of a joke how much better these teams are than the Chicago Bulls. The reason the Heat are here is because the Heat are the Heat. They like to be in this spot for some reason. They like to really just do the bare minimum to get themselves on a playoff spot. It would be kind of cool just to, if I'm going to put my hater hat on here, just to see them actually lose in the play-in and not be available in the playoffs in general, because that will hopefully get them to not take the regular season to be just such a complete joke. Because me personally, I understand why they have that approach. I'm really not too critical of it, especially like I'm not going to tell Eric Spoelstra what to do, but it's not the most fun viewing experience to watch the Miami Heat and be like, yeah, these guys are basically just practicing right now. So I would kind of like if they just kind of got smacked in the mouth and like actually were like, okay, maybe we need to take this shit a little bit more seriously. Maybe at the bare minimum we can put in the effort to get a legitimate playoff seed in the Eastern Conference, mind you, because literally the Heat's record as the 8th seed is the same record as the 10th seed Warriors in the Western Conference. The East should be a little bit easier not to be in a play-in position. Even though I do think the East has also improved this year, the West has just improved dramatically more. The Sixers are here because Joel Embiid missed a huge chunk of the season, and they unfortunately were not really able to keep their heads afloat all too much. Tyrese Maxey was much less efficient without Joel Embiid, just having the defense focus more in on him. They weren't terrible without Embiid, but they were certainly not very good, and that resulted in them dropping in the standings quite significantly, where I remember them being a top 3 seed early on in the year. So between these two teams, it's really just a matter of how much you believe in their ability to just turn it back on to what they're capable of. In the case of the Heat, turn it on to playoff mode, as they've shown us they can do time and time again, whereas with the Sixers, it's actually more of a matter of, hey, can you and Maxey, you being Embiid, can Embiid and Maxey really get that like remarkable scoring duo thing going on again. Tobias Harris has gotten progressively worse as the season has gone along, although I think he's another guy who benefits quite a bit from Joel Embiid's presence, because while Tobias Harris is definitely a severely overrated player, severely overpaid player, he is still a positive one in the right context, and I think that context is him working off ball with Joel Embiid. That context is not him being a primary creator, because his decision-making with the ball in his hands can be quite fucking awful. But yeah, between these two teams, the Miami Heat have the playoff mode that I know they can hit, whereas the Sixers are a real question mark going in. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Miami Heat will beat the Sixers in this one, which means that the Sixers will be playing the Chicago Bulls in that matchup for who gets the 8th seed, who gets the privilege of more likely than not losing to the Boston Celtics. In the case of the Bulls, almost definitely losing to the Celtics. In the case of the Sixers, not so much. Pretty obvious where I'm leaning on this one. It's definitely going to be the Philadelphia 76ers, because they just have by far and away the best player in the series. Honestly, I think they have the second best player in the series. They have easily the best coach in the series. They are, if not deeper, better form fit. Like, the roster construction makes more sense, more modern basketball principles. And also, there's just no way in hell anybody on this Bulls team is slowing down Joel Embiid. You know, I would give other big men a chance, but Nikola Vucevic is just not a guy who is remotely intimidating to Joel Embiid one-on-one. While I think Vucevic is an underrated defender by a lot of people, especially Bulls fans, he's not a Embiid stopper in any capacity. So I just think Joel Embiid's going to feast with this team. And historically, Joel Embiid has kicked the Bulls' ass. In fact, I believe this year is the first time the Bulls have ever beaten Joel Embiid in any game. They've beaten the Sixers, but not when Embiid's playing. Ironically, though, I do think they've beaten them twice this year with Embiid. So the other one was the end of last season. Okay, so Rudy has informed me that they beat them once at the end of last season and once in December of this season. But otherwise, yeah, 14-2 record for Joel Embiid versus the Bulls. So I'm going to go with the 76ers in that one, meaning that they will face the Boston Celtics in round one, and we're going to get a rematch of the Miami Heat and the New York Knicks with the 2-7 matchup. Very interesting there. I find this to be the most interesting alternative, and I especially know that while Joel Embiid and the Sixers is no easy first-round matchup, I imagine Celtics fans would much prefer to see the Sixers and the Miami Heat in round one. Moving on to the Western Conference, we have a first-round playoff matchup rematch, this time in the play-in between the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors. This is interesting because this is a matchup of a more well-rounded team versus a one-man show. The Warriors are essentially a one-man show, while Klay Thompson's gotten better as the year has gone along. For the most part, everybody on this team has been really disappointing, and it's routinely Stephen Curry's job to make this team even remotely competitive. He is single-handedly the reason why they are in the playoff picture in any capacity to begin with. On the part of the Sacramento Kings, though, for what it's worth, they are severely lacking in shooting guard depth. This does free up more minutes for Keon Ellis and potentially even a little bit of Davion Mitchell, who are guys who can do a decent job defending Steph. They have lost a huge offensive punch because they do not have Malik Monk, nor do they have Kevin Huerter, and that definitely weakens their scoring. You're going to be relying pretty explicitly on De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis to be creating all of your offense. Otherwise, like, is Keegan Murray going to step up? That's a way you could potentially find some more offense. But otherwise, I'm really not seeing anybody who's going to be a significant factor on the offensive end outside of their star duo, and that's not great. Last year in this matchup in the playoffs, Malik Monk averaged like 19-20 points per game. Kevin Huerter was bad. That was definitely very prominent in that series, how bad Kevin Huerter was. But of course, we're not just going to lock him into being a severe playoff underperformer purely based on that series. There's a chance he could have made a huge impact here, but neither of them being available, and the Warriors having the Steph Curry factor, they just have by far and away the best player in this matchup. I'm going to go with the Golden State Warriors here, which unfortunately means that the Sacramento Kings are going to be locked out of playoff contention. In the Western Conference, they were probably the weakest link this entire season of the teams that were consistently in that top 8. And then as the year went along, teams like the Dallas Mavericks started to creep up the standings while the Kings slowly creeped down. Unfortunate. I would love to see them make the playoffs in consecutive years, but I just don't think that's going to happen with this matchup. Moving on to the New Orleans Pelicans versus the Los Angeles Lakers. This is easily the most interesting matchup between the two in the Western Conference to me. The Pelicans are a team that has been surging. I have talked about them and the Dallas Mavericks being the potential playoff upset teams, the dark horses. At this point, the Dallas Mavericks have gained such notoriety and favorability within NBA fandom that I do think there is a real shot that they're not even really that much of a dark horse anymore, which would make the Pelicans kind of that by default, but they looked really, really good as the season was going along. I mentioned the Mavericks being a team that was surging as the year went through, but the Pelicans were another team that was definitely well behind the Sacramento Kings that surpassed them. Zion Williamson in his more point forward role has been very huge. Brandon Ingram being there a little bit more consistently, the shot creation that he brings to the table. CJ McCollum is, I don't know, is he the best third option in the entire NBA? He might be. He just might be, because, man, he's like an 18-point per game scorer, 42% three-point shooter on super high volume, good playmaker. The Pelicans in general kind of have a playmaking by committee, like an egalitarian system to their offense, where Zion's playmaking, Ingram's playmaking, CJ's playmaking, like between them, they all average like 5-ish assists. I like them a little bit more than the Lakers, to be honest with you. On the Lakers end of things, they have been better this year than last just because Anthony Davis being there consistently. Also, just as a sidebar, this isn't really related, but it is tangentially. I watched JJ Redick's ballot the other day. He made a video giving away what his award ballot was. Anthony Davis did not make the all defensive team, but then when JJ was doing his all NBA teams, he said that AD was on that team and that he was without a doubt a top 10 defender in the NBA that season. And given that there's no positions in these teams anymore, definitely a weird oversight on that part. It's essentially what the entire comment section was saying, is like, how is he a top 10 defender but not in your top 10 defenders, especially with a bunch of guards who just clearly are not as impactful as Anthony Davis. Like, I would drop Alex Caruso for Anthony Davis as a top defender in the league in a heartbeat. As much as I appreciate Alex Caruso making an all defensive team, AD is just better. AD is much better than a couple of defenders who made that list. But that's not related. Back on to the actual topic at hand. LeBron James, how well will he play? This year, he's probably been the most different version of him on the Lakers, probably the more ideal version of him to me. This is something we've talked about a lot with just the Lakers asking too much of LeBron, whereas I feel like in this regular season, they have done a apt job of not asking too much of him. Playing more off ball, more of a three-point shooter, the best three-point shooting season of his entire career on pretty damn high volume, over 40%. Just a lot more off-ball stuff, a lot of letting D'Angelo Russell or Austin Reeves initiate the offense. He still works as a creator often, and I do think that in this playoff, it's play-in, but playoff style context, we'll see a little bit more LeBron being LeBron and just utter unstoppability. But we also saw in the playoffs last year that wasn't necessarily something that he could just turn on to the same degree he has in the past. Injuries were a factor to that to some degree. I'm going to go with the Pelicans in this one. I just feel like they're the better, more well-rounded team. They're probably the most deep team in the entire league. The fact that they got everybody healthy just in time is great. I think the Pelicans are the better team between these two, which means we are getting a Warriors versus Lakers play-in matchup yet again. I'm sure Adam Silver is licking his chops at that one because Steph versus LeBron is just a money-printing machine. It was a little bit disappointing in the playoffs last year. It didn't really end up being as interesting of a series as we thought it could be. But for what it's worth, I think this will be a very fun matchup, and I really do think it could probably go either way. This is definitely, and this is just the way it's going to be for the Warriors regardless. It's going to be a case of a one-man show versus more of a team. The Lakers have second best player in the series. They have the third best player in the series. They probably have the fourth best player in the series if D'Angelo Russell can maintain, even to some degree, how well he played in the regular season. Austin Reeves has had a past history of stepping up in these moments, so it could potentially be him. Either way, Lakers more deep. Lakers more well-rounded. They don't have a good Steph matchup, though. They really do not have like a super strong perimeter defender that they can throw at him. Like, I'm thinking your best case scenario might be Taurean Prince, or like maybe D'Angelo Russell just really locks in on defense. But honestly, they just don't got the right matchup for it. Having Anthony Davis patrolling the paint is definitely cool, but that's not going to stop Steph from burning you on the perimeter. Rudy just asked me, you don't trust Spencer Dinwiddie, bro? Can't say that I do, especially not to defend Steph, let alone to do really anything all that competently. I think Gabe Vincent's gonna do it either. So yeah, I am going to go with the Lakers, even in spite of the fact that they don't have a good Steph matchup, because I do think it really will just be Steph versus the Lakers single-handedly. And while I think Steph can single-handedly beat an injured Kings roster, I don't think he can single-handedly beat a healthy Lakers roster. So that means our Los Angeles Lakers are going to be matching up with the OKC Thunder in round 1. And the Denver Nuggets are going to be getting the New Orleans Pelicans. So yeah, that is my play-in prediction. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But that is it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, because Nick is currently out on paternity leave. Can't wait to have him back, but for now, Rudy is taking the helm again. I will to some degree as well. But yeah, that's it. Goodbye.